Hi, I'm Peter Sullivan. This is just a suggestion if you're bidding the Wi-Fi contract there's suggestions for reducing power consumption in Wi-Fi. So these would reduce power consumption without impacting your users in any way or your bandwidth. So there's a novel approach being used in Europe called Eco Wi-Fi that is reducing the beaconing frequency, just the frequency that says I'm here, from 10 times a second down to 1 time a second, and that reduces your power by about 90%. If the router is going to sleep mode when they're not being used, that is another tactic that's not used. These are normally on all the time. So there's a patent around that, and if you could request your vendors to look at some of these approaches, the Eco Wi-Fi or the sleep mode, and again, hardwire anything that's easy that you can wire, especially if it does a lot of streaming video, and consider not using the 5 gigahertz bandwidth. That's a higher power and less efficient. And these are tactics that can help save you power until the low power Wi-Fi Halo is announced in 2018. And whether you bid this out or not, these will be useful for you. Thank you, and I've got references if you need it.
Well, we'd love to see those. Yeah.
Sure.
No?
Okay.
No?
Okay.
She said it all.
Okay, great, thank you.
Good. And if you could say, I know Ms. Lee sent us, we have several, you guys sent an email earlier today, I think, right, so we have all that. Was yours in there, Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll just give you the hard copy.
Okay, that'd be
Great.
great. We'll make copies. Great. Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Okay, colleagues, this is for discussion this evening. Let's start with Mr. Collins.
Thank you. I do have comments on this one. I think the issues that have been raised by the community are actually quite important, and I think can be of significant benefit to our staff as well as our students, particularly our youngest and most vulnerable students. In my personal experience, we have had medical experience with electromagnetic hypersensitivity, and it's quite a real phenomenon. It doesn't affect every child, doesn't affect every person, but it meaningfully affects a percentage of the population in ways that I think can significantly interfere with learning. And so I would actually urge us to consider it just like we consider many accommodations for medical and learning differences. And I think in terms of incorporating into our thinking for our wireless infrastructure, obviously we, like most of the rest of the world, have kind of gone about this helter-skelter and done what seemed right at the time, and that's perfectly fine. But I think as we learn more about it, and as it's brought to our attention that there are other factors to consider, I think we would do well, not necessarily to be a pioneer, because it does sound like others are already doing this, but to be a fast follower and to really be thoughtful about this. I think it's fortunate that we're actually doing this procurement at a time where there's some new science and some new thinking and hopefully some new products that'll help us implement it. But this doesn't happen by accident. I think it takes, kind of thoughtful planning by the staff, working with the vendors to try to figure out, the first step to solving a problem is deciding that you have one. So I think if we say this is something we really want to try to make progress on, I'm sure that we'll find some ways that we can make progress, and I hope we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. DiBienza.
Thank you. I have comments too. I agree with Mr. Collins. I think that we've all seen over the past several years that technology tends to outpace us. It's happening really fast. And so this might be one of these things that everyone said, oh, wow, there's Wi-Fi. This is great. It's making our lives easier. And we wire for Wi-Fi. And one of our goals and one of our pillars is safety first, right? Safety for our students, wellness and safety. And so I am interested in learning more. And I'm wondering, Mr. Moore, is this something you are familiar with, this concern? And have you already spoken with vendors, or there vendors that you typically talk to, and is it a conversation already for you?
Yes, it's definitely a conversation we're having. I've met with Ann and Emeritha last spring. Nice to meet you, Peter. And that's the first time I've been at a conversation with Peter. But yes, it's something that's on our radar and something we're already talking with our vendors about as we've started this process.
Okay. And some of the things that Peter, I'm sorry, I don't remember your last name. Peter Sullivan, mentioned about Echo Wi-Fi and going into sleep mode. I know part of the thought is if we either turn the routers off when we're not using them, or if we have them where they can go into sleep mode, that might make a big difference. Currently, we don't have routers in every single room, right?
That is correct. It's not in every single room. It's the elementaries are in every other room, and the secondary schools are about every 2 to 3. So two access points per about every 3 rooms.
Okay. So there's a lot that has to go into thinking about the implications for
Correct.
just being more careful about this.
Correct.
Okay.
So I think one of the strategies I think you'd mentioned is going to every room.
Yeah, so the intent is to look at every single room, because one of the things that you can do with every single room is severely reduce the power, because there are more of them, so you can knock the power down on each individual one, which is not only good for density, but it's also good for a lot of other reasons as well.
And then if I'm not using it as a teacher, I can actually shut it off or let it go into sleep mode or...
So that's managed a little bit more by the system, and all the vendors do it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So in general, we would not have a switch for the teacher to turn it off themselves. It's more kind of a self-managing system, and each one of the systems do it a little bit differently.
Great. Okay, I look forward to hearing more.
Great.
Thanks. Ms. Baton-Caswell.
Well, I think the fact that this is the time you want to do the refresh makes this good timing. And you need to put a plan together anyway. So I encourage you to work, not just work with the vendors. Mr. Sullivan, is this what you do for your career? Yes. If we have people in our community that professionally are involved in this, then ask them to help you or be advisors. I think that certainly is worthwhile. What is the life cycle on this $700,000 expense?
Good question. So in general, our thinking around the wireless refresh cycle is approximately 5 to 7 years. We're right at 5 years right now, and with the current solution that we have, it's a subscription-based model. So in order for us to continue using it after 5 years, we have to pay more subscription fees. So that's one of the reasons we're looking at this. And I'm a fan of outright purchasing, so that in another 5 years we're not here because we have to pay more money, that we can continue to use the product should we want to after the original license term is up. So the estimate is around 5 to 7 years for the life of a wireless system.
So I would make 2 suggestions. One is, I think it would be in your best interest as part of your plan to have a safety plan actually written out. So what are the things that you want to make sure we have after working with the vendors, after talking about what's possible? Don't make up things that aren't possible, because we'll never then be able to rev. But the other is, if low-power Wi-Fi is coming out in 2018, and that's sort of in the middle of our cycle, is there a way to capture that without having to wait 5 to 7 years? And you don't need to answer that, but that's what I would ask. Is there a way for us to take advantage of that, at least in some of our systems?
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Dauber.
Since my employer, Google, is in this market, I'm not going to participate in this. I'll recuse myself from this discussion.
Okay, great. I don't have any questions. Dr. McGee, do you have questions?
No, thank you. I appreciate the community members being here and sharing that information.
Thank you. Team, this is going to come back for decision. Can it come back on consent? The decision is just to,
put out bids.
yes.
Yeah.
I just want to point out Peter's from Los Altos, but we'll take his help anyway.
So we're okay with this coming back on consent? Okay.
Hey, it's 9:50, and Mr. Sullivan is here from Los Altos.
He's clearly committed.
That's fabulous. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, the next